I think it's something that is needed, that we might enjoy seeing the beauty of landscape and genre from the very early days of life in Tennessee down to the present day. It's a beautiful compilation of a variety of different scenes of Tennessee. And of course, Tennessee's landscapes are so beautiful. Our beautiful horizons and skylines are so lovely. And I think this has drawn artists from all over the United States and some from even different parts of the world to Tennessee to paint our natural beauty.
Lois Riggins, director of the Tennessee State Museum, describing the show Landscape and Genre Painting in Tennessee, 1810 to 1985. The catalog for the show is included in the Summer 1985 Tennessee Historical Society Quarterly, and paintings have come to the museum from many sources. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope, with two people who've played major roles in organizing the show, Dr. James Kelley and Lois Riggins.
The nice thing about this is the fact that lenders have come statewide. We have borrowed paintings for this show from literally the mountains to the Mississippi, so it will tour. And I think the museum feels like this is an important thing that we do, is to make available the collection and the things that we have been able to put together to other parts of the state. So it will be at Chattanooga, at the Hunter Museum, and it will be at the Doolin Museum in Knoxville. It will be at the Dixon Gallery in Memphis also.
Primarily responsible for finding these paintings, Dr. James Kelley, Chief of Collections at the State Museum.
Well, I've thought for a number of years that there were many beautiful landscapes of Tennessee that I've come across in the course of my work here at the museum, and was also aware of the fact that nothing had ever been published about landscape painting in Tennessee, and in fact very little has been published about painting in Tennessee at all. And so the more landscapes I found, the more I began to think that it would be a wonderful thing to have a show of them. We here at the museum for many, many years have had a very fine portrait collection, but up until a few years ago we didn't have very many landscapes. And we've been making a very concerted effort to get landscape paintings of Tennessee in the last few years. And among other things that this show does, it gives us a chance to showcase, or show off, if you will, the landscapes that the State Museum has acquired in recent years.
Can you tell me the number that the State Museum has?
Of the 85 paintings in the show, I believe 27 or 28 are from our own collection. And very few of those have been exhibited, since most of them we've acquired fairly recently. And the show has such a diversity of styles in it that I think it allows you to pretty well trace the course of American art history, all the basic styles that have prevailed in American art history, as executed here in Tennessee. It's restricted to landscapes. It doesn't include any portraits or still lifes or anything of that sort. But on the other hand, it's the first and only show in Tennessee that covers one branch of painting, in this case landscape, from the very beginning of the state, from the very first Tennessee landscape in 1810 up until literally the present. I mean, one of the paintings was actually done last year, so it does cover a full 175 years.
Going back to the styles, now you said the earliest painting, I think, is 1810.
Well, the very first painting in the exhibition is a painting of Jonesboro, Tennessee, which I suppose is appropriate because Jonesboro is the oldest town in Tennessee. And this is what we would call a folk art painting. It's a painting by a totally untrained amateur artist who shows no sense of perspective. Everything is above something else rather than behind it. But it's a charming painting, and in fact it's so widely appreciated as a splendid example of American folk art that at this moment it's on loan to the Museum of American Folk Art in New York for a major exhibition they're having. And they're going to rush it back down here so that we have it for the show. The early landscapes are mostly what we would call topographical paintings. That is, they're very exact, literal depictions of particular scenes in Tennessee, so certain places and just exactly what they looked like, mostly done by amateurs as part of their journals as they traveled through Tennessee and that sort of thing.
In the next Tennessee Kaleidoscope, a continuation of this conversation with Dr. James Kelley, curator for the Landscape and Genre exhibition. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lynn Folk.
In the 1820s, we begin to get paintings in the so-called Hudson River School, more romantic style paintings, when Americans came to think that the wilderness was what made America great and what made her different from Europe. And we have examples of that in our show.
The show is Landscape and Genre Painting in Tennessee, 1810 to 1985. It really is a retrospective view of not only art in Tennessee, but history as well. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with Dr. James Kelley, Chief Curator of Collections for the State Museum. In a previous program, he began to trace the development of Tennessee art, as shown in the exhibition, starting with the earliest known view of Tennessee's oldest city, Jonesboro. This painting done in about 1810. Here he continues with the development in the painting of landscapes and people in their daily activities, genre, beginning with the 1820s and going through 1985. All of the artists lived in Tennessee at least for part of their lives.
Probably the most important single artist in the show is James Cameron, who was a Chattanooga artist, because he's the only Tennessee artist who really specialized in landscape painting. And he did a whole series of beautiful panoramic vistas of the Chattanooga Valley, 4 of which are in this exhibition. And then as we get into the 1850s, by which time Tennessee was the 5th most populous state in the United States, Tennessee has become considerably more civilized, if you will, and more sophisticated, and we begin to see a lot of paintings of cities. And paintings, for example, like the one that's on the cover of our catalog, Nashville from Lower City Island, which is perhaps the first painting to show the Tennessee State Capitol building. Then we have a whole section in the show of Civil War paintings, which is not, of course, a style, but rather a subject matter, some of which were done by soldiers in Tennessee, and some of which were done by Northern artists who were traveling with the armies as they went through Tennessee, men who were artists, correspondents for Harper's Weekly or other Northern publications. Then after the Civil War, style changes and painting becomes looser, and the idea becomes prevalent that a painting should reflect something of the artist, not just of the subject. It should show something of the artist's own temperament and ideas. And so paintings begin to become more introspective, they become more diverse, reflecting the diversity of the artists who worked here, and generally speaking are characterized by a looser style of painting. This then, by the late 19th century, becomes what we generally know as Impressionism. The kind of light we have here in the South was very appropriate for Impressionist painting. It was very suitable for the Impressionist style, which broke down light into its individual colors and applied those colors on a canvas side by side. But if you stand back at a certain distance, the colors all sort of blend together into a harmonious whole. Impressionism really lasted in Tennessee well into the 1930s, which was, of course, 30 years after it had gone out of style in Europe. But then in the 1920s and 30s, Tennessee begins to see painting that's much more geometric. We begin to see Cubism in Tennessee. There's some wonderful Nashville pictures by the late Avery Handley, for example, of St. Mary's Church here in Nashville and Hundred Oaks Castle down at Winchester, Tennessee, executed in the Cubist style. And then very semi-abstract works up into the 1960s, after which there seems to be more of a reversion towards realism. Well, there's no one style today that artists work in. And we do have 10 living artists represented in the show, and they all work in different styles, from the photorealism of William Houston to the sort of calculated naivety of Carol Clore and Bill Sawyer, to a very fluid watercolor style of Jim Gray, and some works that just defy any classification, that are just very individualistic. So it's an exciting show, and it does place Tennessee in the mainstream of American art.
Dr. James Kelley, who did most of the research and assembling of the Landscape and Genre exhibition, which originated at the Tennessee State Museum and which will tour throughout the state through May of 1986. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Johnson & Higgins of Tennessee, insurance brokers, and employee benefit consultants. This is Lynn Folk.
This quilt here is a replica of the state of Tennessee flag. If you see the Homecoming 86 emblem with the flag draped over the rocking chair, we plan to use this at our fair this year to get some publicity for our Homecoming 86 program, and also to sell chances on that to raise some money. It's, of course, full quilt size for a bed, and we think it'll be a very popular item to help us raise money to fund our Homecoming 86 project.
Dyersburg is one of several hundred towns in Tennessee with many projects and events scheduled for 1986, the homecoming year. Two of the projects involve quilts. One is a replica of the state flag, familiar to Tennesseans now, draped over a rocking chair as the official homecoming emblem. The other quilt depicts Dyer County history, with each panel representing an episode from county historical records. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope on a visit to Dyersburg when I talked with local Homecoming Steering Committee Chairman John Gauldin, president of First Tennessee Bank of Dyersburg, who told me about these and other 1986 projects.
We have a number of projects that we are working on for Homecoming 86. Probably the major one for the fundraising has to do with building a youth building for our new fairgrounds.
Do you have a definite time when you'll be having any kind of parade or celebration or festival or anything like that?
We talked about that for a long time as to whether we would try to concentrate our activities in one time period or whether to spread them out over an extended period. And we decided that because we hope to attract a number of people back to Dyersburg for Homecoming 86, that we would spread our celebration activities out over a several-month period. We're going to start in the spring with the theme of Homecoming That Counts, and that will be built around a dogwood tour of our town. As another project for Homecoming 86, we are planting dogwoods in Dyersburg. Last year alone, we had over 1,200 trees planted, and this year, almost that many. And we hope to make Dyersburg a very beautiful place and hope to have a tour through the city to show off our dogwoods. Also, in connection with that, we're building around a Build Glass crusade, where it's a joint evangelistic crusade for the city for an entire week during the spring. Then later on through the year, we're planning a barbecue contest and some other activities also.
How about any musical events that you know of? Any special musical events? I'm sure you have many here anyway in Dyersburg.
Well, we hope to have through our Heritage and Roots Committee perhaps a pageant or some activity that would depict the history of Dyer County. We're also hoping to be able to have some concerts on the square as they used to do in olden times. But we are looking forward to a great celebration, and we hope we'll have a lot of folks coming to Dyersburg for that time. And it's been a thing, kind of a coming together in our community, particularly with paint up, spruce up sort of thing, and a litter campaign going on that will make the town look a little better. And with the dogwoods, we think it'll be a more beautiful place for people to visit. And then with our other activities that we're planning, we're looking forward to a big year for Homecoming 86.
Going back to the quilt in front of us, do you have any more of these? I think they'll be so popular that one isn't going to be enough.
You know, that has been a comment that's been made by several people. I think the historical quilt will really be a very, very valuable commodity, and I think it'll be a shame to just have one person have that, and we've already talked about that should be displayed in the library or something where it'll get a lot of public viewing, because that is quite a thing to go through and make each panel, a separate picture depicting a part of our history. But there's been a lot of interest in that, and I think that will be a thing that will create a lot of interest when it is completed. And I'm anxious to see it myself.
John Gauldin, president of First Tennessee Bank of Dyersburg and Homecoming 86 Steering Committee chairman for Dyer County. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Johnson & Higgins of Tennessee, insurance brokers and employee benefit consultants. This is Lynn Folk.
Get ready, Tennessee. We're coming home.
I will never really be satisfied with myself until I can paint what a bird sounds like, how a leaf sounds when it falls. And eyes very often will have such an expression in them, especially if they're not looking at anyone. Watch the eyes of children when nobody's around, and they will tell you stories that you have to put on paper.
Mildred McKinney of Kingston, Tennessee, was watching television when she made her decision to be an artist. She admits that she didn't know much about art, her earlier career being engineering. But during the past 4 years, she has studied extensively, and through self-training, discipline, and hard work, she is now a professional artist. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope. I first met Millie Mack, as she's called, at the Reva Bacon Art Show in Cookeville, where she was exhibiting. Our second visit was at her home, when I saw her studio and we sat in her kitchen and talked for hours. I wish there were time for all the thoughts she expressed to be broadcast. But here, anyway, is the beginning of that conversation and her reaction to the artist who was teaching painting on the TV screen.
He just got me so built up, so enthusiastic, I decided I would try it. And I didn't tell anybody. I just went out and sort of sneaked out and got a canvas and some paint and brought them home, put my hands over my eyes and just slopped that paint on there. And I was so scared. And this was right after I had retired and had gotten over the vacation idea and was bored to death. So I was so happy to find something new.
Well, I think all this began right here in your kitchen, right where we are, too, when you were watching Bill Alexander. Didn't you say you were fixing your fingernails?
Yes, I had a brown paper bag laying down with my fingernail polish over it and painting my fingernails. And I was following the strokes that he was showing on his paintings. I was painting with my fingernail polish on that brown paper bag, and I said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I thought, well, I've painted walls, I've painted houses, I've painted furniture, and I certainly know color. And my background in engineering was so boring. I'm going to learn how to do that distance, how to make a tree, not by lines, but with color.
The transition must have been difficult from a background in engineering where everything has to be so precise. And you have to throw all that aside, don't you?
Yes, I wrote to one of the paint companies and got involved with the modular paint colors. Since I didn't know equations, I could work out the tone formulations that a lot of people can't understand in the modular paints, but I could. That was a sort of a step over from my background, and that sort of transferred me into learning the tones and colors of paint. I was learning my colors. I still had not learned how to make depth into my painting. That took me quite a while to learn that, because as an engineer, all I do is draw two lines and let them run together. But in painting, I had to learn the water color methods. I had to learn the oil painting methods. And I even had to take some of the instructions from house painting, how to protect from mildew, lead could be poisonous. Oh, there were just so many things involved in it. But of course, now I didn't go into this for about a year. I just put that paint on as I remembered. I would remember different places I had been. I've lived in 39 states, and there is a story in it someplace in every one of those states. So I figured that's 39 paintings I would at least get out. And since that time, I have redone some of those with the added knowledge of, I would say possibly 40 books that I have read on the different masters and their techniques. And it's a big investment, but and art teachers can lead you, they can encourage you, they can tell you shortcuts, but a person must teach themselves by doing.
Mildred McKinney of Kingston, Tennessee. Her work is seen often now, especially in the Kingston area. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the WPLN Educational Foundation. This is Lynn Folk.
Most of the cigar store figures that we have seen will have, in one form or another, tobacco leaves on them, and it's so subtle that a person misses it, and you just assume it's part of the dress or part of the feathers within an Indian costume. But upon closer observation, one sees that the headdress is not feathers, as an Indian would have worn, but tobacco leaves. That the carver took his imagination and went a step further and applied tobacco leaves on his headdress. And then his skirt. The Indians wore buckskin skirts, and where you see a lot of fringe, you look a little closer, and you'll see that they're real tobacco leaves. And they have these tobacco leaves as part of their bracelets and part of their jewelry.
The Museum of Tobacco Art and History is in Nashville, Tennessee. It's one of 2 such places in the nation, and it possesses 6 cigar store Indians, 3 life-size, which stood in front of tobacco stores in earlier years, and 3 smaller ones used for countertop display in the stores. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with David Wright, manager of the Museum of Tobacco Art and History, as we toured the gallery, looking especially at an unusual quilt hanging on the wall and admiring the artwork and carving of the Indian figures.
There's a lot of folk art involved in cigar store figures as well. We have seen figures that were carved by slaves, that they're in a sense a very primitive art, but a very nice artwork. And we see a variety of people carving these. You have your professionals, and again you have your other people who are doing it just as a means of a whim in a sense.
I would naturally expect these cigar store Indians to be men, but some of them are figures of women.
We have on display here a squaw with her papoose, which is cast in zinc, which is the most unusual material. And originally, when she was sold, in around the 1870, 1875 period, you would order her from a book. And you could order with or without the papoose. And if you decided to go with the papoose, naturally it was more expensive. You got a little more metal on her shoulder. So most people naturally ordered her without the papoose because they couldn't afford the extra $10, and that's what the papoose cost.
There's something else relating to that figure, but it's also relating to something on your wall. Why don't we start with the figure and what she has in her hand, and tell me what follows after that.
Most cigar store figures held bundles of cigars in their hands or a bundles of chewing tobaccos. This particular figure, the squaw with her papoose, has a bundle of cigars in her hand, and around that bundle we see a yellow band which symbolizes the silk ribbons that were tied around bundles. Now the silk ribbon serves as a purpose of holding the cigars together and also as a means of keeping records of how many cigars you make in a day. Well, the Victorians never threw anything away, and what we have on the wall is a cigar silk ribbon quilt made from cigar ribbons. And the quilt really has several hundred ribbons, if not possibly several thousand ribbons on it. And each ribbon represents, say, 20 to 25 cigars. So we're looking at a representation of thousands of cigars on the wall. But the quilt is really nice because it's a nice piece of folk art made in the 1880s. It's made from all silk ribbons from cigars, so the entire quilt is silk. And on the silk ribbons it has numbers or names. Those names and numbers are the names of the cigars in which the ribbon was wrapped around. For an example, DH10 or 724. That 724 is a name of a cigar. Or you may have Little Havanas or Red Cross. All of those. Now, first of all, let me say this. The quilt was made outside of Boston in Cambridge around the 1880s by a lady. Most of the cigars were from New York and Pennsylvania, but there are some ribbons on there that are from Tennessee. Here we are 1,000, 1,500 miles from Boston, and this was in the 1880s, and they have cigars in Boston from Tennessee. And the one that really makes the quilt outstanding is a blue ribbon that forms a nice diamond pattern on the quilt. That blue ribbon is the Blue Button Cigar, Blue Button Cigar Company, Memphis, Tennessee.
David Wright, manager of the Museum of Tobacco Art and History, where there's an extensive collection of photographs, pipes, tools, tobacco jars and boxes and snuff boxes, all with their decorative labels from years back, paintings, cigar store Indians, and other related artifacts. It's located at 8th Avenue North and Harrison Street in Nashville. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Dale and Associates, civil engineers and land planners in Nashville. This is Lynn Folk.
We're a museum to be enjoyed by all, especially an art lover and an antique lover as well, and then, of course, naturally, the pipe smokers. The museum has people here from everywhere, including downtown Nashville. We also have one of the highest visitations in international visitors than other museums, mainly because the museum is international. A person can come here from almost any country or culture throughout the world and see something here that's from his homeland.
The Museum of Tobacco, Art, and History, near the Tennessee State Capitol in Nashville, is only a little more than 3 years old, but there are items on display from all over the world. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope with museum manager David Wright, who recalled that many visitors arriving at the museum expected to find agricultural exhibits concerning tobacco growing and the technical aspects of tobacco processing. They do find some of that, of course, but they're surprised to discover hundreds of art objects on view, especially all the pipes from many, many countries.
We have in our collection several thousand pipes. In fact, we are known internationally for our pipe collection, especially our meerschaums. The meerschaums really are the finest pipes in the world. Now, meerschaum is a clay-like mineral that is quarried mainly out of Turkey and then made into a pipe, and it's white. People think it's ivory, it's bone, but no, it's a meerschaum. And it carves into beautiful pipes. For an example, we have one pipe here that is about 15 inches in length. It's a very large pipe, and it has the Roman goddess of the hunt, Diana, and she's on her horse, and she's about to be attacked by this lion. But what's really nice about the pipe is the intricate carving. It's so detailed. You can even see the lace in her flowing dress. You can see the bird she's killed and placed on her saddle as part of the hunt. The leaves all have the veins, and nothing is left undone. It's a magnificent carving that was done from 1854 to 1869.
These pipes are so beautiful. Were they ever used for smoking?
Some were, some weren't. And that's what's fascinating as you go through the museum. You see a lot of interesting and most unusual pipes, and you say, how could they have smoked this pipe? And it could be that particular pipe was never intended to be smoked, but used as a means of decoration or as someone's whim. For an example, we have some glass pipes. These pipes are 2 and 3 feet in length, and they may be almost a foot in diameter, all hand-blown from about 1790 to 1820 period in England. And they're very fragile, but a person looks at it and says, you can't smoke that. And you turn around and says, that's right, because it is glass. It would crack from the heat. Then what do you do with it? And you just hang it up and look at it. And that's what they would have done at that time.
I wonder why they decided to make a pipe if they weren't going to use it.
They probably made many things. It's just that the pipes have lived because of the unusual curves and swirls that they have, because they made loops with the glass. You can see a loop, or you can see the whirls, the swirls in the glass itself, and they're very, very colorful. We have lots of ruby reds and the blues and this sort of thing. It's just really beautiful colors. Another pipe that comes to mind that's a non-functional pipe are our Staffordshire pipes. And these are clay pipes made from a coil that may be 9 yards in length. And there's no way you could smoke some of those pipes. There's just too many coils involved to make a pipe that's only 12 inches in length that start out as 9 yards. Or as we call them, snake and puzzle pipes. We also have the porcelain pipes, and it's just like your finer china. These are porcelain pipes from Central Europe. The Germans were very fond of these pipes. In fact, they're almost their typical pipe of Germany of the 19th century. The bowls are porcelain, and then you have a reservoir underneath to capture the tobacco juices. That also is porcelain. Both are heavily hand-painted, beautiful scenes of the everyday lifestyles of Germany. We have a variety of things that pick up from where the pipes and tobacco containers leave off, and as other advertising forms, such as trade cards. The first baseball cards originated from the tobacco industries as a means of advertising. We even have Harlequin playing cards that were given out with cigarette packages as a means of advertising. But today, it's beautiful artwork because of the lithographic processes then.
David Wright, manager of the Museum of Tobacco Art and History at 8th Avenue North and Harrison Street in Nashville. It's open weekdays 10 to 4 and Sundays from noon until 4. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Johnson & Higgins of Tennessee, insurance brokers and employee benefit consultants. This is Lynn Folk.
If you want to be able to tell handmade lace from machine-made lace, you will usually find that handmade lace has got a mistake in it, if not several mistakes. If the machine makes a mistake, it will make it every pattern repeat. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to spot machine-made lace, though.
In this case, we're talking about handmade lace, an ancient and modern craft and art, always popular with both men and women. When Susanna Fuller came from England to teach lace making at the Cheekwood Fine Arts Center in Nashville, she taught her students how to handle the bobbins, pins, and thread, and how it was necessary to do all of this on the surface of a hard pillow. But in addition, she related the folklore in connection with lace making. This is Lynn Folk for Tennessee Kaleidoscope, talking with Susanna Fuller and listening to her tell of the connection between lace making and fireworks, and how popular nursery rhymes like Jack be nimble, Jack jump over the candlestick, and 1, 2, button my shoe all had their origins with lace making.
It's steeped in folklore. I expect you all know the nursery rhyme, 1, 2, buckle my shoe, 3, 4, knock at the door. Well, that is because lace makers in the olden times used to always make lace together, rather like you have quilting bees and things like that. It's nice to have company to do it in. It also saved electricity. Well, they didn't have electricity. It saved oil, saved lighting, saved heating. So you would put on your shoes and you would go and knock at the door of your neighbour, and when you got there, you uncovered your lace pillow, and the bobbins that we used to manipulate these threads in one part of England are called sticks. So you pick up your sticks, and whenever you travel with a bobbin, they all have, with bobbin lace, it always has a mind of its own, and it will get itself in a frightful muddle unless you're very careful and pin it down very carefully. So 7, 8, you've got to lay your bobbins straight and get them all in the right order before you start. 9, 10, the big fat hen is the big pillow that you work on. Now we work on smaller pillows, and there's a great many different shapes that can be, well, they're easier to carry about, and you can make different sizes of lace on different sizes and shapes of pillows, you see. So that is how they started it. And of course, they used to teach all the children, and the person that taught the children would take the lace that they made in exchange for teaching them to read and write, and just the basics of counting, perhaps. And then she would sell the lace in order to cover her expenses for teaching them. The children, you know, when they were lace schools, used to play bobbing for apples and various other games. One of them was to jump over the candlestick that they used to light their work, which is about 2'6" high, and if they blew the flame out, they had to pay a forfeit, and it must have been pretty dangerous for the girls in their long skirts. Some lace teachers were pretty nasty. You had to do a certain length every day, or else you were in trouble. If you didn't do it right, the little girls were bent over and had their noses rubbed in the pins that we put in. It was said that the lace teachers didn't really like teaching little boys much because they wore high stiff collars, and it was much more difficult to thump their ears if they did wrong. But there were quite a lot of boys that did it. In fact, there's a nice little story about a girl who hadn't done her right amount of lace, and she was going to get into a terrible bother, she knew, but she was so tired she just couldn't do it anymore, and she went to bed weeping. And her father came in from the fields and saw that she hadn't done her proper amount, and he sat down and finished it for her before the morning, because he had learnt how to make lace as a boy.
Well, I just didn't know lace was so involved.
Well, the patron saint of spinners, weavers and lace makers is St. Catherine, because she was reputedly martyred on a wheel. And the Catherine wheel is the insignia of lace makers, and in England we have a lace guild which has that for their little badge. Originally, sort of commemorate her martyrdom, they made a wheel of straw with bits poking out all round the surface, and then they'd set light to it and start it spinning. And that was the origin of the firework, the Catherine wheel.
Susanna Fuller, visiting Tennessee for the first time and teaching the art of lace making to Tennesseans. This program, Tennessee Kaleidoscope, made possible with the joint support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Choices Restaurant in Franklin. This is Lynn Folk.